Hello everybody and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You are here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today we're going to talk about spoilers from day 2 and 3 of Duskmourn. Diving right in here, you're going to already see I'm just having the basic lands up as I do my intro, so you can get a look at what those look like. There are some really cool themes going on in this set with 5 different areas. You got the Mistmoors, the Flood Pits, the Boiler Bridges, the Balmurk, and lastly the Haunt Woods. Some very cool art for these very distinct areas. But we have 2 different cycles of lands that I thought were super interesting and definitely worth talking about. So first off, we have the first set of lands that care about the amount of life a player has and whether or not it enters the battlefield tapped or not, which is an interesting concept on a lot of these lands that revolve around you having a certain amount of lands, or if this is a certain amount of lands you've already played. But these 10 lands, we have the Strangled Cemetery, Razortrap Gorge, Ruckus Carnival, Peculiar Lighthouse, Neglected Manor, Murky Sewer, Lakeside Shack, Etched Cornfield, Bleeding Woods, and Abandoned Campground. All these I think are going to be pretty cool. I'm not sure if these are going to find any standard play or play outside of that. Probably very much not in Commander because you start with 40, so really this is not going to get good until way late in the game. But I could see some other formats caring more about these, especially playing them on later turns and fixing for your mana. Next up, we have another new cycle of land cards called the Verge Cycle. And these lands can tap for a single color of mana, but if you control a basic land type of one of the types of this land can tap for, it can tap for the second type. So for example, we have the Flood Farm Verge, which taps for a white, but you can tap it for a blue only if you control plains or an island. The same is true for the respective colors of Gloom Lake Verge, Hushwood Verge, Thornspire Verge, and Blazemire Verge. Now, I can definitely see these being way more playable as basic land types are way easier to get. And while I think there's some mana fixing issues if you were to include too many of these in your deck and not enough basics or lands with basic land types, I think that these are excellent lands and worth talking about. So now moving right into some notable cards, we have Special Guest, and we received 8 Special Guest cards today. We have Expropriate, Hallowed Haunting, Maddening Hex, Nauseous Revival, Phantasmal Image, Sacrifice, Soul Warden, and Unholy Heat. Definitely some really good playable cards that we see in a lot of decks, and some I don't see too often, but I think is definitely worth putting in this slot. I think more people should play them, and this will give them a chance to. So this is very cool. But now moving on to my favorite category, the Legends and Cool cards. Cards I think are notable, and I think we should talk about more. But before we do so, I would just like to say, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. So starting out, we have Altlanak the Thrice Called. This is a 7-drop legendary creature insect beast with trample, and whenever this becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you draw a card. For 1 and a green, you may discard this card and return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. While land destruction is not super popular in Commander and other formats that revolve around these legendary creatures, returning your best lands back to the battlefield is definitely worth doing. If you're playing a mill deck or if you do get removed, you know, this definitely becomes standard playable when you start talking about some of the new really expensive and good lands like Three Tree City, and of course Cavern of Souls that was just reprinted in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. This becomes a very good card to be able to get those lands back to the battlefield tapped. Next up, we have another room card here with Central Elevator and Promising Stairs. Central Elevator says, when you unlock this door, search your library for a room card that doesn't have the same name as a room you control, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle, and then Possessing Stairs at the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. You win the game if there are 8 or more different names among unlocked doors or rooms you control. So, if you control 4 room cards and they're all unlocked, this will trigger Promising Stairs, and you will win the game right there. That's a pretty cool alternate win con. You know, I'm not sure how hard it's going to be to collect all these room cards right away, so that's definitely something to keep your eyes on. But a card that came spoiled early on Monday, we have Enduring Curiosity, one of my favorite effects in Magic. 2 blue enchantment creature, Cat Glimmer with Flash. When a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and when this dies, if it was a creature, return to the battlefield under its owner's control as an enchantment. So a very cool way. This makes it really difficult for your opponents to remove if they have to remove this and then have to remove the enchantment separately. In addition, Flash is very unique on a card like this because if you're swinging in and your opponents don't expect you to play this, you can just drop it down and draw a ton of cards. So I am loving this. Moving on to a newer sci-fi themed card, we have Ghost Vacuum. single mana artifact, tap exile target card from a graveyard, 6 tap sack ghost vacuum, put each creature card exiled with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter on it. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types, activate only as a sorcery. This is a very cool way you can either use it to exile the best pieces from your opponent's graveyards and then potentially get them back. Now they are 1/1s, but if you have some ETB or Death Trigger cards, it could definitely be worth grabbing. Another really cool card is Grievous Wound. 5 mana enchantment aura, enchant player. Enchanted player can't gain life, and whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded down. What an interesting way to just very quickly make your opponent's life total dwindle. I can definitely see this card being played in certain aura decks, but I don't think it's going to make as big a splash. But next up, we have some new Leyline cards. We have Leyline of Resonance, Leyline of the Void, and Leyline of Transformation. So, Leyline of Resistance, new enchantment here. If Leyline of Resonance is in your opening hand, you may begin with it on the battlefield, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that only targets a single creature you control, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is definitely a really good and playable card right now. We have a lot of cheap instants. Red, in particular, is really benefiting from the last set. All of the Valorant cards that let you get additional benefit if they're targeted would be perfect with a couple copies of this card in it. The reprint here is Leyline of the Void. This is a very good card. If a card would put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. This is a great card to put in decks that really suffer from their opponents having stuff in their graveyard, and this is a great way to get rid of it. And then we have Leyline of Transformation. As it enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other types, and the same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So whether you're searching or playing a Kindred style deck, Leyline of Transformation is going to help you get there. Next up, a very funny name to a very powerful card that we're getting a new version of. We have Meat Hook Massacre 2. This time it's XX black 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 legendary enchantment. When Meat Hook Massacre 2 enters, each player sacrifices X creatures. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3. If you do, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they may pay 3 life. If they don't, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. So now every time a creature an opponent controls dies, they have to make a choice. Is it worth 3 life, or is it worth you having an additional creature on your board, which is insane. This is very cool. At a minimum, you can just play this for 4 mana and then get this cool effect onto the board. So this is definitely worth checking out, and I'm sure just like the original Meat Hook Massacre, this one is going to end up being somewhat expensive as well. But we go to another room, and this is another mythic room. We have Mirror Room and Fractured Realm. Mirror Room here is 2 and a blue. When you unlock this door, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types. A very cool way to just get copies, and it's actually 3 mana, which isn't too bad either. But Fractured Realm, 5 blue blue. If a triggered ability of a permanent you control triggers, that triggers an additional time. This is a great ability. I honestly don't know if 5 mana is too much to pay for it, but if it's already on the battlefield and you don't have anything else to dump your mana into, why not? Looking now at one of our legendary planeswalkers here, you have Nico, Light of Hope, 2 white and a blue legendary creature human wizard with when Nico, Light of Hope enters, create 2 shard token. 2 and tap, exile, target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So these shards just become copies of whatever you have. Now there's some ways I know that you can make additional shards from older sets. I don't know if we're going to get any new ones in this set, but making it a copy of any number of creatures would just be insane to have a ton of. So I could see this deck going very crazy very quickly based on what you're copying. Next up here, we have Overlord of the Flood Pits. 3 blue blue enchantment creature avatar horror with impending 4 for 1 blue blue. It is flying, and whenever Overlord of the Flood Pits enters or attacks, draw 2, then discard a card. Pretty cool card. Flying is really nice. It does have a smaller butt on it, which is kind of disappointing, but I understand. Moving on to another room, we have Smoky Lodge and Misty Saloon. So Smoky Lodge, 2 and a red. At the beginning of your first main phase, add red red. Spend this mana only to cast room spells or unlock doors. Then Misty Saloon, 3 and a blue. When you unlock this door, create an XX blue spirit creature token with flying, where X is the number of unlocked doors among rooms you control. Now, I think this would be a good point to talk about. I think rooms especially in this set, they're trying to make an archetype, right? I was talking to one of my friends about this, and he's like, there's no way that there's going to be anything revolving around rooms. But when you look at this, it really looks like it. They want you to play a ton of rooms, and they want you to have a lot of them on the board, giving a whole bunch of abilities, paying mana into them to keep them around. So I can definitely see some interesting combinations in the future. But next up, we have the Swarm Weaver legendary artifact creature Scarecrow. When the Storm Weaver enters, create 2 1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying and delirium as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control. Get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. This actually seems like a pretty strong card. Giving everything +1/+1 and Death Touch is pretty strong. There's a lot of ways to make a bunch of these tokens, so you're either going to clear your opponent's boards or just get in for a ton of little ping damage and end the game that way. But lastly, probably one of the cards I want to know more about is Victor Valgaroth's Sensual. For 1 white and a black legendary creature human warlock with Eerie, whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, if it's the second time, each opponent discards a card, and if it's the third, put a creature card from the graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. No finality counter. This is a cheap commander. You just play a ton of really cheap enchantments, maybe auras, discount them all. This is going to be a very, very cool card, and I think this is going to be a very strong deck, just letting you cheat things back into play very easily. And of course, let's talk about the rest of the cards we got today. Not saying that these aren't as interesting, I just didn't think it would be as interesting to talk about them all. So we have Acrobatic Cheerleader, Clockwork Percussionist, Drag to the Roots, Ethereal Armor, Fanatic of the Harrowing, Fear of Failed Tests, Fear of Imposters, Fear of Isolation, Glimmer Seeker, Grasping Longneck, Infernal Phantom, Inquisitive Glimmer, Patched Plaything, Patchwork Beastie, Piranha Fly, Pyroclasm, Say Its Name, Shard Mage's Rescue, Sheep Herding Spirit, Slavering Branch Snapper, Stay Hidden, Stay Silent, Turn Inside Out, Twitching Doll, Undead Sprinter, Unwilling Vessel, and lastly, Valgavoth's Faithful. I would just like to say thank you so much for watching. Today was so much fun. We got a lot of cool spoilers over the last couple days, and I can't wait to show you more. Is there a card or playstyle you're really excited about from this set? Please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear about it, or just say hi. I'd appreciate it. I'll say hi back. In addition, if you could please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe, that would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Now today's Scryfall card of the day is Verdant Sun's Avatar. Ixalan's fertile rays enliven us all. Each of us is a testament to the sun's strength and love. Chitali Lightning Raider. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.